Hey, my name is Linda Bowman, and I'll be your host today on your favorite podcast program, exploring the national developments in this country. Your program, also known as Ask the Expert. The program today will be joined by dynamic people here in the studio. We have John Nakuta, who is our legal expert in the studio today, and of course also Dionse Naris, who is the director of Tiamon, who will be speaking from a community-based level. Today, we shall look into the legal frontiers of the LGBTI rights in Namibia, and more so also diving deep into the landmark case by Friedel Dausap. And as we move into unpacking this program, we would like to be able to really reflect on the journey of where we are as a country. So, guys, Friedel Dausap is challenging the Namibian government on the constitutionality of the sodomy law and the fact that he is an adult gay man and that he's having consenting sex. And that also preludes around the fact that he believes that this law is unjust in this country. So, why this case? What makes it historic, and why is it that we're talking about it today?
Well, I mean, good afternoon, Linda. Good afternoon, everybody. I think for us as a community, why now? Looking at sort of the little backlash that came after the Supreme Court judgment last year, and between looking at all of the amount of killings rising and almost a justification of the existence of these laws for the amount of violence being perpetuated and the lack of protections that exist, right? Now, look at Friedel. Um, Perhaps first understanding who Friedel is, a gay man, meaning he's a man that get attracted to other men, right? Member of the LGBT community, but also a key human rights activist in the country. What does this mean for us now? Potentially, a win would probably mean that the existence of this particular section would be scrapped from the laws, and that when we are, as advocates, trying to have conversations on development and policy creation, that the excuse no longer would be we cannot because there is a criminal procedure act that makes your particular activities criminal, right? So yeah.
John, it's a crucial step that we're heading into challenging discrimination and violence that is faced by LGBTI community. And it's also about time that we address the outdated sodomy law, as Dionce is flagging, and also she linked the Criminal Procedures Act to that. So, what's your take actually as a legal expert on this case? I mean, I'm sure you have a better view in text also in understanding what it means legally in the future of this country.
Now, first of all, thanks for the invitation, Linda. I don't know whether I can call myself an expert, but I'll try to do justice. I think my take on the case, it's very, very necessary. It comes at the right time because we have on our law books, in the form of common law, a crime that glaringly discriminate against different sexes. Um, I'm not an expert when it comes to issues of homosexuality, but from my little knowledge, the crime of sodomy as it stands criminalizes the is it consensual anal sex between two men. What is discriminatory about it, and I stand to be corrected, of the crime of sodomy, is that when the same act is committed between two heterosexual parties, a man and a woman, for example, consensually, the law is saying that it's none of our business. And that in itself is discriminatory because the law cannot be seen to to arbitrarily make distinctions between people um, and preferences just because we've made the law, or the common law in this case, even though it's not written law, but the common law has been inherited from Roman Dutch law. That is our colonial legacy. So it's also a question. So coming back then again also to your question, it's also important that we begin as a nation at all its levels, the judiciary, executive, at all levels, begin to really seriously address the issue of decolonizing our law. Because we do have on our law books, in this particular case, old, outdated, archaic common law crimes, and we tend to now use this. On the one hand, we are saying down with colonialism. But on the other hand, because it fits us, for whatever reason, we are upholding these old common law crimes, like in the form of in the crime of sodomy. So that is why this case is very, very significant. And I can later talk about why is it also significant, but not for now, when it comes to the discrimination clause within our constitution, and that is Article 10.2 of the Namibian Constitution. But for now, those would be my 5 cents.
The verdict is approaching, and it's a big thing because we've seen the Namibian government being uncomfortable because of the other precedents of cases that have been put forth. And in this case, Friedel is challenging the offense of sodomy and related laws that are inherited, as you said, by colonial times. And now that we are at this point, what do you think, both of you, what are you anticipating with this particular verdict that would be coming on the 14th of June, 2024?
Well, I mean, the community's been exploring that conversation, and we keep saying we're being positive. We're anticipating a win. The court system seems to have been leaning towards the protections of human rights. We've had really positive judgments over the last 2 years. So we are really anticipating winning, but also as we're anticipating winning, we're conscious about the state possibly appealing. And that's probably also part of our next steps, is to try and prepare for what that would look like. Because we know either way, there is going to be an appeal.
John, what do you think? Just looking at the case from an outside, Deontay speaks from a community basis, you know. She's in her feet, legs, and whole body is in it. But when you look at it based on what you've read around, you know, you might not know the extreme details of it. But what do you anticipate this judgment to look like?
My students are writing human rights this afternoon. And usually there would be a question about discrimination in the exams. And I'm mentioning this because in the early 2000s, our Supreme Court laid down what we call a discrimination test to objectively look at the situation. And with this 4-part test, which we call it, you look at it, you ask questions, and at the end of the day, you come to a conclusion as to whether or not the discrimination that is complained about can be said to be fair or unfair. And I'm mentioning this because the 3 judges that is presiding over this case will have to ask themselves 4 basic questions. I'll quickly take you through one. The first one is, objectively viewed, in the case of Dousup, Friedel, and the common law, does the common law, that's the first question, make a differentiation between people or categories of people? And that discrimination can be in the form of a distinction that the law make, or an exclusion that the law make, or a restriction in terms of exercising your rights and freedoms? Or does the law very directly or indirectly give preference to any one of the groups of people under question? If the answer to that question is yes, then the next question must be asked. In terms of the law, the test that the Constitutional Court established. And of course, Friedel seems to be saying the law in question, the common law, make a distinction between criminalizing consensual sex between between homosexual men, same-sex homosexual men, and not criminalizing heterosexual. So yes, indeed, there is then a distinction. So the next question that the court will have to ask is this distinction that Mr. Friedel is complaining about, is it based on any of the prohibited grounds listed in Article 10.2? And correct me if I'm wrong, he says that distinction is made under sex between. He said, and I actually so much like the fact that he's not throwing in there sexual orientation, because sexual orientation is not listed under Article 10.2. So yes, there's a distinction based on sex. Then the next question that the court will have then to ask is that whether this distinction based on sex amounts to discrimination. Here's the crucial question. Discrimination in the sense that whether that distinction either nullify or impairs the equal recognition or enjoyment and exercise of rights between people. And my answer to that, it certainly impairs. Maybe not nullifies, because you can still do it without the police knowing. The problem is when the police were to get to know what you're doing, your neighbors or whoever can alert the police. And as we know, during our discussion before we started, we said sodomy is listed as a Schedule 1 offense. So potentially they can come on the scene and do whatever they want to say. So to all these questions, my answer is yes, there's a distinction based on sex. It certainly nullifies and it impairs the equal enjoyment of rights between gay men and heterosexual people. So the last question for the court then to consider is this distinction complained of, is it justifiable? In other words, is it fair or unfair under the circumstances? The Attorney General seems to be saying it is fair, because the Namibian society hasn't yet told the lawmakers to get rid of the crime of sodomy. Now, with all due respect, that cannot be the reason why you discriminate against people. So, long story short, Linda, I think if the judges were to apply the test that has been set in the Muller case way back in the 2000 by the Supreme Court, objectively viewed, there cannot and should not be, I shouldn't say should not be, it's almost certain that they may just come to the kind of outcome that people like yourselves and others within the community is hoping for. Yeah.
Do you think that case precedents would be, of our neighboring country? Because this is the first in our country. Do you think they'll, and I know we shouldn't get involved in, meddling into the justice system and the legal systems that are in the proceedings. But just hypothetically, do you really think that as somebody who's followed the Namibian legal landscape, that there would be possibility that the state decisions of these diverse cases are going to play a critical role in it?
The answer said, over the past 2 years, we have seen a really very welcome move by our superior courts. And that's actually a provision that I still like. So if I read the case, the Dikgatso case, where the Supreme Court said they cannot be seen to abdicate their responsibility to interpret the law to public opinion, because that would be dangerous. And so I totally agree what she said, that if one were to read also even the High Court case in the Khatso, very, very progressive. Of course, they couldn't set aside the Supreme Court judgment of if is it in Frank because of the hierarchy and stare decisis rule that we follow. But they were bold enough to say that the Supreme Court was wrong in the Frank case because in Frank, as we know, the Supreme Court said the notion of sex as used in Article 10.2 should not be read for what it's not supposed to be. It should be only read to mean to refer to genitalia, man and woman, and not bring extra things such as sexual orientation and gender identity into that. That was the Frank judgment in the
Which
Supreme
is similar
Court.
to what Friedel is doing. He's not bringing in the gender identity, he's not bringing in the orientation, he's only talking about his sex as a man.
That's why I so much like that approach, because sex is there and he's not trying to read in anything. They said, as a gay man, my right to sexual intimacy, my right to privacy is violated because of this common law crime. And so as I said, one is hopeful for the development of the jurisprudence that the High Court would kind of give the kind of interpretation to their own test, discrimination test that they have given. But even if they were not to do that, because obviously we can but just hope. And again, we've got president from the very Frank case, no, not Muller case. Muller, when this test was developed in the Muller case, Mr. Muller, a German gentleman, lost the case because Mr. Muller wanted to take on his wife's surname. And the High Court found that the discrimination that was in the law then, that does not allow a man to take on the surname of his wife, is perfectly okay. It's part of Namibian history, and that is how we are. But Mr. Muller, with the assistance of the Legal Assistance Center, was not satisfied with the outcome of the Supreme Court. And so they took this matter all the way up to the Human Rights Committee of the UN. And so that's what I would say. Making a case, if, for example, the LGBTI community were to lose the case next week, they were to appeal to the Supreme Court. But for the principle at stake, I would say we've got other international forums and bodies that needs to be explored for making a case of equality and non-discrimination. And take this matter and escalate it, I would say, to the Human Rights Committee of the
So
United
that basically
Nations.
means first exhausting your domestic systems, right?
Exactly.
Deonse, you, with the basis of the case that we've laid now, the verdict coming out, what do you think Namibians will react to this, to this particular verdict? How do you think, or what do you anticipate?
So, general public, not so much a concern, right? It's really looking at how the key leadership in the country responds to it and what the rhetoric is that comes from there, because that is usually what then riles up the people on the ground. So the community's been meeting. They've been trying to put in safety and security measures, particularly on the ground, to try and see, because we also have been picking up a trend where after every almost monumental win or lose, but something that creates this big hype around LGBT communities, the level of violence that our communities on the ground experience always sort of increases. The Friedrich's murder, may their soul rest in peace, sort of created these empathy from community on the ground towards the community. They were a little bit more caring and a little bit more concerned around where are we finding ourselves? Is this right? Even the leadership, the type of things that they're saying they should not be saying. Um, so we are a little bit worried about what this is going to send, because again, the understanding is Sodom is illegal, so LGBT people are illegal. So imagine if we lose the case, this almost then gives another license to discriminate, or a license to kill, or a license to increase on prejudice, right? So we're on a little seesaw in terms of what public would react like.
If you've just joined us, you're listening to your favorite podcast show, Ask the Expert. I'm joined today by John Nakuda, our legal expert, and of course, Dionse Naris, who is speaking on behalf of the LGBTI community, but also associated with an organization called Tiamon. John, from a person outside the community, what do you think how will people react towards this verdict?
Yeah. Again, people probably, those ones that are totally against the lifestyle of the LGBTI community, would obviously be aggrieved. And I can already see the reaction of those church, reactions from the church, and those ones that, as I said, very clearly don't like the lifestyles. But it brings us back to the obligations of the state under human rights law. Two in particular. One that comes to mind, under international human rights law, the state is having an obligation to protect. The obligation to protect basically says it is incumbent on the state to go all out to protect people from their rights being violated by any third party. And so here comes the violence that is being perpetrated by or against the LGBTI community. The state can't fold its hand, literally speaking. It's like, if you're aware that this community needs protection, you go out, all out, and give the necessary protection. Because if it is that you were aware, or you ought to have been aware, and you didn't do anything to protect people from their rights being violated by any third party in society, human rights law holds the state accountable, the state in its institutions, like the police, whoever in those positions of authority, and they can be held accountable on account that they are complicit in the violation of the people, because you were supposed to have taken measures and you didn't do it. Preventative measures, due diligence comes in here. And if it is that after this case that people were to be attacked and the state didn't do enough to protect them, then the community certainly can take actions, bring cases against the police and the state. The last one also, there's also under human rights law an obligation to promote. Human rights law basically says it is not enough for our rights to be written on paper, to have just paper rights. People must be made aware of their rights. Someone like her obviously knows her right, but there are other communities, other people within the community that does not know the right that she's having. And for that reason, once again, human rights law says it is incumbent on the state to promote and to educate, raise awareness about rights, so that the people, and it is not just the community that must run their training, workshops, and whatever. Human rights law is, under human rights law, we are saying the state is the primary duty bearer when it comes to human rights. In other words, it is the business of the state to educate the people through awareness raising, education, and training on the rights of the LGBTI community in this particular case, but also on all other rights. Yeah.
As we're winding up and getting to the end, almost end of our program, and you're talking about a civic education that is imperative for the state to take as the main custodian, actually. And obviously, the other institutions are just making sure that they build onto it. The role of the media, let's talk about the role of the media, because we all know that the media during this time would capitalize, one, on making sure that they've covered the story, two, it brings good sales. So where do we place the media in its role as we march towards the 14th of June? Because the media is the watchdog of our communities, to understand.
We're hoping that they remain objective, ethical, and really try and stick to the facts of the case. The community is trying to see how then we can best hold on to the narrative, um, and be able to sort of shape the narrative from our end so that it doesn't necessarily become too sensational, because we know, again, in the Supreme Court judgment, the way some of the stories were reported on, it really created misconceptions and misunderstanding of what the actual verdict was. So again, there's also a purposeful, meaningful engagement that's going to follow post the case from particularly the community and the institution that's responsible for the communication strategy of the DOSAP case, to deliberately try and make sure that the media has the right facts, and that most of what is potentially put out comes from the community. Again, I keep saying there's a huge seesaw for us as a community here, because we're really hoping, but we also know there are particular news outlets that are going to try and sensationalize it, and put it out in a way that's going to obviously again paint the LGBT community looking like they're looking for special rights, or that we are trying to is it break down the traditional setups of communities. So there's always this anti-gender rhetoric that's going to keep pushing. What we're going to try and do as a community is try and counter that narrative with really the lived realities and experiences and the impacts of what this case actually means.
John, what do you have to say to the media, the fourth estate?
Well, obviously, I'll now speak in my capacity as the media ombudsman. The Code of Ethics and Conduct for Namibian media is very clear that the media must report ethically, professionally, accurately, and fairly. Those really are the main principles and standards, and everything flows from there. So I can but just say that indeed the media is expected, like in this particular case, like in any other ones, to do what the code requires from them to do. I know of complaints. In fact, I was also just last week part of a training session organized by the NID, and the complaint really is that many a times the media, either willfully or unwittingly, is using wrong terms, incorrect phrases that seemingly perpetuate the challenges and suppressions that the community, the LGBTI community, is facing. So yes, it is really incumbent on the media to stay to the course, to report objectively. Of course, we can't now, and I totally agree with what she says, just report on the facts and use your platform to educate and not to demonize anyone, because that is not your role. But your role is also to play that promotional, educative, and of course reporting role. But don't take personal sides in what you are reporting.
So your office, and I'm going to use that title you just used as the media ombudsman. Have you received any complaints regarding reporting for LGBTI in the media?
To be very honest, Friedel, it's almost 4 years ago. We had talks, and the idea was to embark on a campaign. Friedel mentioned to me back then the problem of the media either using wrong terms, incorrect phrases, and whatever. And the idea was to run under the Office of the Media Ombudsman some kind of sensitization training courses, but I've never received a formal complaint. Yeah.
So this is something that actually also needs to be raised awareness of, Deonce, in your community, in order to know that there is an objective space that would be able to assess the type of reporting that we're having. As
But shall I just, on a
Yes.
lighter note,
Yes.
I've learned that I was actually reported and complained about at the, it was like a complaint was laid against me as the media ombudsman with the ombudsman, Mr. Dikuya's office. Dikuya?
The choir.
I commented last year when I was in the Netherlands, or was it in the Netherlands or Holland? Remember there was this demonstration down sodomy, and one of the placards legalized sodomy, something like that, was a child.
Oh yes, when the child was.
And
Yes.
I was asked to comment, and I was just saying, let's leave our kids out of this. And some members of the community didn't take that lightly. And yeah, so I was reported as
That's
the
quite
media
interesting.
ombudsman.
But the most important thing is that we cannot, when kids are not able to understand who they are as a movement, Deonce, you can't. The child's safety and interest comes first before you can actually.
To be very
assess it.
honest, sorry to interrupt. I was more, I mean, already the community is accused for grooming. Grooming children from a young age, and said so. Really, almost like as an advice, don't do those kind of things, so that people don't have reasons to point at you. Yeah, but that's
And that
just-
photo it also
Yeah,
popped
yeah.
up recently this year, and it became another big issue because the point is, as much as the mother took the child to the march, the photo shouldn't have appeared because the message doesn't correlate with a 9-year-old or 8-year-old or so. But we're about to wrap up this program, and I would like to know what your advice is for the community in preparation to this verdict. And I'm talking about communities being in the LGBT community or the Namibian community, because both are going to be spectators to the outcome of this verdict. Any thoughts?
Well, I mean,
Do you guys feel you're not safe in when the verdict comes, Deonce? If you're going to have a lot of LGBTI people there, is there safety issues that are at play here also?
so I mean, yes, the community is clearly also going to try and visibilize itself on the day. The police have guaranteed us safety and protection. So we trust that our Ministry of Safety and Security will do what it is supposed to do. We are, however, as a community, cautioning our own people to be a little bit more aware and conscious of where they are moving, when they are moving. We were also cautioning, particularly some people, depending on in which rural areas they're finding themselves, on being too visible, because we also don't potentially know what the outcomes of the case are going to be. But there is generally an anxiety from the community on what the outcomes would be and what the impacts on safety and security would be for the community. So yeah, I mean, for the court case, people are being told, if you show up in court appropriate attire. We also know the organizations are over the week going to be embarking on a little sensitization on, if you're coming to court, what are you going to wear? What's the appropriate attire? This is how you behave in front of court, all those type of little things. And then generally how to keep safe where they're finding themselves in their living spaces.
John, any thoughts about the verdict? Your
Actually, it's very sad listening to her that we are at a stage where we must now appeal to people, take care of yourself. This might be the potential. It's actually very sad. Knowing where we come from, that we fought against discrimination in all its forms. it is really sad to hear that people say that we did not fight for homosexuals and whatever. Such a narrow meaning attached to non-discrimination. But I can just appeal to everyone, whatever the verdict is, we should accept the verdict, we should embrace it. And of course, as a person that really is passionate about social justice and believing in what Martin Luther King said, and I tread an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice anywhere. So for me, whether it is for the LGBTI community, whether it is a case of people with disability, where everyone is suffering from inequality, from non-discrimination, I associate myself with such kind of causes. So for me, I fully support the call for equal treatment and non-discrimination from whichever quarter it comes. And I hope really that all of us that really say that we are peace-loving and freedom-loving people, that we will begin to embrace the Namibian Constitution in all its glory. Well, I can't say to the justice system because remember, under criminal law, you can also be convicted of contempt outside court in the sense that you're trying to influence a pending judgment. So I will not say to the judges in terms of what is it that we expect from them. I can't do that.
But we can say that we are hoping that the court will affirm the principles of justice.
Well, yeah.
Or is that not diplomatically right in terms of legal language?
Because with that you're trying to influence and it's actually it's a very thin line in terms of, but of course we all know what my sentiments are, and we are really just hope that the court would do what justice demands in this particular case. That's all that I can say. For the community, people like myself, is, what is the right word? Is it an ally?
Yes.
I regard myself as an ally, unapologetically so, because it's a case of justice. We are solidly behind you. We support your call for justice and equal treatment and non-discrimination. And for the people, for the Namibian people out there, it's like these others that you are referred to, they are not, yes, even if it's by choice, because the Constitution allows for freedom of choice. I can be whoever I want to be. Others are saying it is not by choice. So whether it's by choice or by design or by default, it is none of our business. And everyone has the right to live under the sun so freely given by God.
I love the sun. To say the sun has no discrimination, it shines on everybody, irrespective of who you are. Deonce, final words.
I mean, look, the LGBTI community. Oh, cool, guys. Also use your democratic right. Go out there, register. This is the time really for us to come through and use our voices. This is also the time I think we need to be the loudest. Yes, it's a little unsafe, but I think this is when we need to really visibilize ourselves and really use our voice. So come out in numbers. Let's do this. And this is probably just a stepping stone. There is so much more that we need to do, and what looks like the courts are probably going to be the most significant route at the moment to be able to do this. For everybody else, really, we are your siblings, we are your neighbors, we are your children. Let's love and support and care. That's it.
Thank you very much to Deonce and John for joining us today. What an inspiring way of really exploring it, because we've not had any conversation nationally so far, while we're a week away around what this case actually means. So you guys are breaking grounds as we are putting this out to be able to just set a tone towards the 14th of June as the verdict comes through at the High Court. My name is Linda Bowman. Thank you very much for joining Ask the Expert. Until next time, thank you very much.